This right here is the Sony PlayStation 4. Time to review it. Sony's previous console to this, the PlayStation 3, was a great console. However, the fact that they focused so much on multimedia features and the fact that the PS3 was quite difficult to develop for definitely hurt its reputation and sales. And mind you, the PS3 was far from a failure. It sold over 80 million units worldwide. But compared to the PS1 and the PS2, it paled in comparison when it came to sales. And so when Sony was ready for the 8th generation of game consoles, they decided to do things a little differently. They went back to basics. They focused primarily just on gaming. And of course, they still added on multimedia features to the PS4. It just wasn't the primary focus when this thing was revealed in 2013. It was primarily just about the games. And the fact that they went back to basics when it came to marketing was definitely a very good call. And it helped put PlayStation back up on top. So, like I mentioned before, the PlayStation 4 was revealed in 2013, and compared to the PS3, it was a major change. Not only did it have a brand new redesigned controller, but it also used a different architecture. Instead of the massive headache that was the cell processor on the PS3, Sony decided to go with x86 for the PS4, which made developing games for it much, much easier. Thanks to a newly refined controller, vastly improved online functionality, amazing must-play exclusives, the PlayStation 4 was a huge hit for Sony, selling almost 117 million units worldwide between 2013 and about 2022. It's kind of hard to say specifically how much that they've sold because, well, since the PS5 is out and it's 2023, as of recording this video, it's kind of hard to tell if Sony is still reporting PS4 sales or not, but at least as of around 2022, that would be the general sales number. Which, compared to the 80 million units for the PS3, it was a massive, massive improvement. So like I mentioned before, the PlayStation 4 launched in 2013 around $400. And then what you actually see in front of you is the second model called the PS4 Slim. This was released alongside the PlayStation 4 Pro, which is a more powerful version of the PS4 that had 4K capabilities. This was released alongside that around 2016. And obviously it is a smaller and sleeker redesign of the original PS4 model. This one in particular I've owned since 2018, and when I first picked one up, I was super excited and completely blown away with the amazing exclusives that this thing had. If I'm really being honest, as much as I love the exclusives on PS3, I just might say that the PS4 has even better exclusives. Just so many memorable games that I played on this thing over the years. And the amount of awesome exclusives got even better when they released the PSVR in 2016, which gave the PS4 VR capabilities. Which I did do a review on that a while ago, so definitely check that out. It's pretty cool. As much as I really like the PS4, unfortunately I'm going to be parting ways with it here soon. Because, not going to spoil anything, but I may have gotten a bit of an upgrade. Taking a closer look at this thing, we have our disc slot right here. Just like the PS3, the PS4 can read Blu-rays, so obviously all your Blu-ray movies and even your DVDs will work perfectly fine on this thing. Although, unlike the PS3, you can't play compact discs on the PS4 at all. It's strictly DVD and Blu-ray only. We also can't forget our Sony logo right there, just to remind you that you're playing a Sony console. And then we have our power button and our eject button. There's a little tiny LED strip right here on the Slim model that will blink blue when the system is either booting up or shutting down. And then it will glow white when the system is on. And then it'll glow like an orange when it's in rest mode. We'll also find our PS4 logo, just to remind you that you're playing a PS4, of course. And then we have two USB ports. I can't remember. I want to say they're USB 3.1 on the Slim and PS4 Pro models. I think they were originally USB 3 on the original model, but I could be wrong. These might still be USB 3. I'm not entirely sure. On the top of the console, we have our PlayStation logo. Definitely can't forget about that. On the left side, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there are some logos here that show the capabilities of the PS4. So it supports Blu-ray discs, Dolby True HD, DTS Master Audio, and obviously HDMI. We also have some air vents along the side here, and another one right there as well. And then this right here is, let me see if I can get it. But this is, oh, come on. That is where your hard drive goes. On the right side, we have more air vents. We also have, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's some PlayStation button logos right there engraved into the console. Nice touch. And then this little hole right here, I think that is for the vertical stand for the PS4, so that you can obviously stand your PS4 up vertically. On the back of the system, we have our AC power, the PlayStation camera connector, which this was something that they introduced on the PS4 back when it first launched. Just like the PlayStation Eye for the PS3, the PlayStation camera connected to this special proprietary port, and basically you could use the PlayStation camera for a variety of functions. You could use it for like video chatting, you can use it for live streaming, and you can even set this thing up to have face recognition just by showing your face, and it'll log you into your PS4 automatically. That's actually pretty cool and also slightly creepy. The PlayStation camera was also used for the PSVR. We also have an HDMI connector, Ethernet, and then on the original model there was optical audio, but on the PS4 Slim that is not present. I should also mention, unlike the PS3, which supported analog video connectors, on the PS4 it's strictly HDMI, nothing else. We also have some more air vents for the fan, which in terms of fan noise on the PS4, it can be quite polarizing. If you have an original model, chances are it is quite noisy. It's not as big of an issue on the PS4 Slim. Mine in particular is audible, especially when I'm playing like a heavier game, although it's not anywhere near like the original model. That thing screamed like a jet engine. On the bottom of the system, we have another PlayStation logo. And then, funny enough, these are the rubber feet on the PS4, which actually use the PlayStation logos, which I think that's actually a really nice touch. This is model number CUH-2215A, and it looks like it was manufactured July of 2018. Here's the DualShock 4 controller for the PS4, which, if anybody knows PlayStation controllers, they have legit stuck with the same exact controller design since the PlayStation 1, all the way up even to the PS3. However, all that changed with the PS4. This redesign is massively different compared to previous controllers. So we still have our old PlayStation D-pad, analog sticks, face buttons, We still got our L1 and R1 and our L2 and R2 buttons. And we even still have our dedicated PlayStation button. But you may have noticed that's something new. That is a touchpad. They added this onto the DualShock 4, brand new for a PlayStation controller. And this touchpad had a lot of use cases. You could use this touchpad for like cursor navigation on the system keyboard for messages. Some games will also have you like drawing on the touchpad or making certain gestures. And there's also a dedicated button underneath the touchpad. And look at that, we even get a built-in speaker, just like the Wii remotes. Although unlike the Wii remotes, the sound quality coming out of this little speaker is much, much better. It was mainly PS4 exclusive titles that took advantage of this speaker as well as the touchpad. So one example that comes to mind is a game called The Playroom, which is a built-in application on the PS4 that basically is kind of like a tech demo showing off the various functionalities of the DualShock 4. You have your little robot buddies, and you can swipe the touchpad to shoot them out of the controller. And then if you like vacuum them up to put them back in your controller, you can shake the controller around and this will start making noise, making it simulate, something actually inside of the controller. Kind of a nice touch. Unlike the previous PlayStation controllers, instead of start and select, you now have options and share. Options typically is the replacement for the start button. And then most games will use select as the button underneath the touchpad. And then this dedicated share button is for capturing video clips and screenshots while you're in game on the PS4 and sharing them online. There's also an extension port on the bottom of the controller for connecting a keyboard, and there's also a headphone jack. Something that's also new that they added to the DualShock 4 is a light bar. So again, it's mainly the PlayStation exclusive games that take advantage of this light bar. So basically, I'm trying to think of a use case. So an example would be like in a first-person shooter. So if your health is running low, it will change color on the touchpad. So like if I was like just about close to dying, it would like blink red. This light bar is especially used a lot in PSVR games. And on the original version that shipped with the PS4 when it was brand new, it just had the light bar on the back. Although later revisions of this controller added a headphone jack and then also had a little line right here that would also light up just like the light bar. We also have a micro USB connector for charging the controller. And remember what I said about the triggers on the PS3 controller being really mushy? Guess what? They improved them on the DualShock 4 and they are much, much better. So what exactly is powering the PS4? Well, starting off, for the CPU, we have a semi-custom 8-core AMD x86 Jaguar-based CPU clocked at 1.6 gigahertz, which is integrated into the APU for graphics, and then it also has a secondary low-power processor for background tasks. For memory, it has 8 gigabytes of GDDR5 RAM, along with 256 megabytes of DDR3 RAM for background tasks. For storage, it has a 2.5-inch laptop-style hard drive. And in terms of the capacities that the PS4 shipped with, there was either 500 gigabytes, 1 terabyte, or 2 terabytes. And you do also have the ability to swap out that hard drive with an SSD. For video resolutions, the PS4 supports 480p, 720p, 1080i, and 1080p. For a graphics chip, it uses a custom AMD GCN processor with 18 CUs, clocked about 800 megahertz, and has about 1.84 teraflops of computing performance. For camera capabilities, it uses the proprietary PlayStation camera, which supports resolutions of 1280 by 800 at 60 Hz, 640 by 400 at 120 hertz, and 320 by 192 at 240 hertz. For wireless connectivity, the PS4 supports Wi-Fi, IEEE 802.11n Wi-Fi, and also supports Bluetooth 2.1. For disc formats, the PS4 supports Blu-ray and DVD. For power consumption, it can wildly vary. So it can consume as little as 10 watts when it's in standby mode, or up to over 150 watts when gaming. And finally, the PS4 Slim measures in at 1.54 by 11.3 by 10.4 inches and weighs approximately 4.6 pounds. Now let's talk about the games that I have for PS4, starting off with my physical games. So I have a decent selection of physical games. I'd say about half of my collection is PSVR only titles, and then these are the titles that are just regular PS4 games that may or may not support PSVR. Game prices for PS4 as of recording this video can wildly vary depending on how old the game is or if it's a new release. Because keep in mind, even though the PS5 has been out for 3 years as of recording this video, Sony is still going to be supporting PS4 until about 2025. And there are still some releases that are coming out for PS4 as well. So those will still most likely be retailing for full price. Although for older titles, they are coming way down in price. Most of the heavy hitters that I've picked up usually range between $10 and $25. But again, as time goes on, that is definitely subject to change. First, we have Infamous Second Son. This was a pretty early title in the PS4's lifespan. I want to say it only came out like a year after the PS4 had been out. And I absolutely love the Infamous series. It is some of my favorite action games on PlayStation, and even some of my favorite games ever. And Infamous Second Son is no exception. Is it as good as the first two games? No. But it's still a pretty good game. It's got amazing voice acting. It still actually looks pretty good to this day. And the core superpower action gameplay is still there. And that's all that matters. Please, Sucker Punch, make another one. I will definitely buy it day one. I love Infamous. Make another one. Concrete Genie. I haven't played this one yet, although I've heard some pretty good things about it, and even my wife has played it before, and she liked it. This game does optionally support PlayStation VR, and from what I've seen, it looks like it is some sort of like third-person platformer slash puzzler, but again, I haven't played this one yet, but I have heard some pretty decent things about it, and it's also a PS4 exclusive. BioShock: The Collection. This is a remaster collection of BioShock 1, 2, and Infinite with updated visuals and better frame rate. And this is definitely the definitive way to play the BioShock games. The original versions played fine, but this remaster collection plays even better. So yeah, whether you get this on PS4, Xbox One, or PC, it is highly recommended, especially if you're into first-person shooters. BioShock games are some of the best. Deadpool. Yep, that's right, the mercenary with the mouth had his own video game at one point. Although, you probably didn't know that, and unfortunately not a whole lot of other people knew that. This originally came out on PS3 and Xbox 360, and then later got a port to PS4 and Xbox One. Some of this game is really good, although a portion of it is pretty mediocre. The voice acting and the humor are top-notch, which is honestly the only reason why I played this game. Although the gameplay is pretty shallow and repetitive, so I do recommend playing through it at least once just for the humor, because honestly there's some pretty laugh-out-loud moments in this game, but I wouldn't I wouldn't recommend playing through it again after that. When it really comes down to it, in terms of the gameplay, it's pretty meh. God of War. This was a huge release for PS4 back in 2018 because, well, it's the first God of War game that we got since, God of War Ascension, I want to say? I've only played bits and pieces of the original God of War games, but when I picked this game up, I was completely blown away. I freaking loved this game. It's got amazing voice acting, one of the best combat systems I've ever seen in a game, and it looks absolutely beautiful on PS4. This was one of the first PS4 games I played where my jaw was on the floor the entire time. That feeling only comes once in a console generation, where you just sit back and you're just like, wow, we've come a long way. This game did also get a PC port later on, and whether you play it on PS4 or PC, it is a phenomenal game. I highly, highly recommend it. And when they announced a sequel to this game, I didn't know if they could follow up an amazing game with a sequel. But somehow, some way, they did it. And they made it even better. Just like God of War Ragnarok is a fantastic game. I absolutely loved this game. And I bought it day one, which is something I usually don't do for games unless I'm really, really into it. Everything I just said about God of War applies to God of War Ragnarok. It is just like God of War, but better. It plays and looks just about the same as the previous God of War game, although it's got some minor under-the-hood improvements that just make the combat system a little more refined. God of War Ragnarok was also supposed to be exclusive to PS5, although due to the pandemic and the chip shortage and everything involved in that, they ended up also releasing a PS4 version. The PS5 version is definitely the way to go, although the game still plays perfectly fine on PS4. But yeah, the God of War games on PS4, some of the best games I've ever played, period. It's a no-brainer. Star Wars Battlefront 2. This is obviously a sequel to the Star Wars Battlefront reboot that was released by EA and DICE. I played the first one when I first got my PS4, and it was alright, although it didn't really have a whole lot of content, and plus, there was no single-player content at all. And when they released Star Wars Battlefront 2, it was a little better. It now had a single-player campaign, and it had a lot more content. Although there was some controversy when this game first came out, because it was littered with microtransactions that were pretty much required if you wanted to get a remotely decent experience online. Although they did eventually end up removing all of the microtransactions in the game, and yeah, it definitely improved things a lot. It's not my favorite Star Wars game, but it's still pretty good. Oh, and EA and DICE, if you decide to make a third one, don't screw it up. No pressure. Medieval. Those of you who grew up with the PS1 might recognize this title, because it's a remake. This PS4 exclusive basically takes the original Medieval game and gives it a fresh coat of paint. It's a surprisingly beautiful game, and I love the atmosphere. Although the gameplay can be a little hit or miss. The controls can be a little awkward, and it's actually somewhat difficult. If you ever played the Medieval games and you're curious about the remake, I would give it a try, although it may not be for everybody. Yes, it looks pretty, but it's got its flaws. It's alright. Here we have Borderlands The Handsome Collection and Borderlands 3. The former is basically a collection of Borderlands 2 with all the DLC and including the spin-off title, Borderlands the Pre-Sequel, again, with all of its content. This compilation improves the frame rate and the graphics compared to the original Xbox 360 and PS3 versions, And if you're running it on PS4 Pro, it actually has the ability to upscale to 4K. Everybody knows Borderlands 2 is a fantastic first-person shooter. So when they announced a sequel, people were definitely excited. I haven't really gotten around to playing much of Borderlands 3, although my wife is like a huge fan of the Borderlands games, so she has been playing Borderlands 3 since the day it came out. From what I've seen, there is a lot of really good things about Borderlands 3, although there's a bit of not so good things as well. It looks and plays far better compared to its prequel, although a lot of people said that the story wasn't all that great compared to Borderlands 2, and it also didn't get as much DLC as Borderlands 2 got, but it's still a great first-person shooter. I definitely recommend it, especially if you're a fan of the Borderlands games. Doom. This was a long-awaited reboot of one of the most beloved first-person shooters of the 90s, and it was definitely worth the wait when it came out in 2016. This game takes all of that gritty, bloody, awesome gameplay of the original Doom games and just completely modernizes it. It looks good, it plays good. What can I say? It is a fantastic first-person shooter. And so when it was time to announce a sequel, I got to wondering to myself, how could they possibly follow up one of 2016's best first-person shooters? Simple. Make an even better one. I was super excited when they announced Doom Eternal. It was originally supposed to come out in 2019, but then that got delayed to early 2020. And I bought it day one and absolutely loved it, just like Doom 2016. The gunplay is better, the music and the atmosphere is more gritty, and the difficulty is cranked up to an 11. Doom 2016 was definitely a challenge, although Doom Eternal has some ridiculous difficulty settings. Even on the lower settings, they'll still give you a challenge. And if you decide to go headfirst into the higher difficulties, good luck. Not even kidding, there is even a single life mode, where basically it is the hardest difficulty, but you only have one life. And when you die, that's it. Game over. Back to the beginning. So for the difficulty alone, it might not be for everybody, but if you're up for the challenge, Doom Eternal is a fantastic sequel to Doom 2016. All right, let's hook this thing back up and show it in action. Power up initiated. And then we have a little blinking blue light showing that the system is booting up. We should be getting a picture here soon. Maybe. Oh, there we go. So we have the PlayStation logo as the system's booting up. And here is the login screen of the PS4. So all we have to do is press the PlayStation button on the controller and log in. And here's the main menu of the PS4, which it looks really similar to the XMB on the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Portable. If you recall, I did a review on the PS3, and I did mention that some elements of that user interface made its way into the PS4 and even the PS5 interface. I do actually really like the interface for the PS4. Just everything's all laid out just like on the XMB, and easily accessible. And yeah, no complaints whatsoever. The only thing that kind of annoys me is with the TV and video apps, there's no way to put those in a folder, so you have to boot up a separate application just to go to like YouTube or Hulu or Netflix. But it's a minor issue. My tripod, unfortunately, is not tall enough to record the TV, so unfortunately I'm going to have to hold it for the time being, so sorry if the video looks a little shaky at times. So starting from left to right, our first application is the PlayStation Store. Of course, self-explanatory. That is where you can find new games, applications, and even movies to download onto your PS4. Then we have the What's New section, which is pretty similar to the section that was on the PS3. This will basically show you news about new games that are coming out, as well as community posts by either you or your friends list. And I believe, I don't have this connected to the internet right now, but I believe it'll also show you like live stream / uploaded videos for various popular games from various users. It's actually pretty cool. The capture gallery is where you'll find all of your screenshots and screen recordings from your games. Just like the PS3, the PS4 does have a built-in internet browser, and it works well enough. It's a pretty basic internet browser, nothing really special. The TV and Videos app is where you'll find your movies that you've downloaded onto your PS4, as well as your video streaming services that you have downloaded, like Hulu, Tubi TV, YouTube, Netflix, the likes. Live from PlayStation is where you'll find various live streams from various platforms from various users. The ability to live stream from your console was a really big selling point when PS4 first came out. I haven't tried it myself, so I can't really say for certain exactly how well it does. And I do also know that the Xbox One does also have the ability to live stream as well. PlayStation Plus games, obviously this is where you're going to find your games that you currently have from PlayStation Plus. Here's an interesting one. This is the Playroom. This is basically a built-in game / application. It's more or less a tech demo that shows off the capabilities of the PS4 controller as well as the PlayStation camera. And surprisingly, yes, it does have trophy support. And then finally, we have our library, which is where we can find the entire list of all of the games that we own, as well as our installed applications. Pressing up on the D-pad will give you another set of operations. This is where you can access your PlayStation Plus membership and all the settings that are associated with that. You can access your notifications. You can access your friends list, events, which I haven't really played around too much with this, but from what I've seen, basically it will give you notifications of like Destiny 2 here, for example. It'll give you notifications about new content that's coming out for a game. We can also access our messages. We can do a party chat. We can access our PlayStation Network profile. We can access our trophies list, go to the settings, and power off the system. And if you hold down the PlayStation button on the controller, yet another set of options. This is the quick menu. So this will give you quick shortcuts to various operations. So like, for example, if you want to adjust the volume on the speaker on the controller, you can do just that. You can also adjust the volume for your headphones, adjust settings for your microphone, and such. You can access your friends list. You can access your power settings, your online status, notifications, broadcast, SharePlay, which I haven't played around with this either, but I want to say, hang on a second, let's find this out. What does this do? Oh, okay. So from what this looks like, it looks like this is an application where you can start a friend party, and basically they can either watch you actively playing a game, or I think they might actually be able to like join in and play the game via co-op. I don't really know. Still interesting. And then we also have the ability to customize our quick menu by adding other applications to the quick menu. So yeah, really nice interface. I really like it. Now, unlike what I normally do with digital games, since I have quite a big library of digital games on PS4, I'm not going to go through the entire list on which one's good, which one's bad, which one I recommend, and whatnot. But I will let you glance through some of my library, so got some good stuff in here. Some of it I've played quite a bit of. Others I haven't played in a while, and there's some that I bought quite a while ago that I still haven't played yet. So let's move on to some gameplay. It should be no surprise for any PlayStation controller, but the analog sticks on the DualShock 4 are very responsive. Barely any dead zone whatsoever. So if I find a spot here quick away from the enemies and just barely press on the analog stick, Delson's already moving. That is pretty nice. And also, I have noticed they actually feel a lot more accurate and tighter than they did on the DualShock 3. Like, the analog sticks on the DualShock 3 were fine, but they're definitely better on the DualShock 4. What's also nice is instead of having your bog standard concave analog tips like you normally had on previous PlayStation controllers, they're still concave on the DualShock 4, but there's like a little ring around the analog stick, and it just makes the analog stick feel a little better, and it makes it feel like your thumbs aren't going to slip off the analog stick as easily. Like I mentioned earlier, the DualShock 4 does have a built-in speaker, just like the Nintendo Wii Remote, and it actually sounds somewhat decent. So let me find a spot here quick where it uses the speaker on the controller. So if I absorb the neon power over here, I don't know how well you were able to hear that. I'm using the microphone that's on the PlayStation camera, and it's not the highest quality, so I don't know how well you heard that, but take my word for it, it sounds pretty nice and clear. And it gets surprisingly loud too. So if I bring up the quick menu here and adjust the volume on my controller, I'm going to turn it all the way up. It gets surprisingly loud. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody who's used a PlayStation controller, well, since the beginning of PlayStation. The D-pad on the DualShock 4 is, of course, quite responsive. It makes playing 2D games like Sonic Mania a lot more enjoyable. It is better than the D-pad on the Xbox One controller, in my opinion. The Xbox One controller has like a clicky D-pad, and I'm not really the biggest fan of those. So the D-pad on the DualShock 4 just feels a lot more natural, at least to me. Compared to the triggers on the DualShock 3, the ones on the DualShock 4 are a big improvement. There's no lip on the DualShock 3 triggers, so your fingers tend to slip off really easily, and they also just felt really, really mushy, and honestly not that responsive. These ones are a lot better. I do kind of like the triggers a little bit on the Xbox One controller, especially for first-person shooters and racing games, but they're still really, really good on the DualShock 4. I should also talk about the touchpad on the DualShock 4 because, well, it was a brand new feature when PS4 first came out. And yeah, no surprise, very responsive. It's just like your standard touchpad on your laptop. It'll read even the slightest gestures or even the most aggressive gestures. I believe the touchpad also works for the UI keyboard if you're like typing out a message. I almost forgot to talk about backwards compatibility on the PS4, or rather lack thereof. So the way that PS4 handles backwards compatibility, unlike previous PlayStation consoles, is kind of weird. So no, it can't play PS3 games, although it can stream PS3 games through PlayStation Now, And no, it can't natively play PS2 or PS1 games. However, you can still play select PS1 and PS2 games that have been re-released on the PlayStation Store. But in terms of just popping in a disc and installing it and playing it, yeah, not going to happen, unfortunately. When it comes to emulation for PS1 and PS2 games that have been re-released on the PlayStation Store, they work well enough. Obviously, in some games you might have some weird issues here and there, but in terms of gameplay and whatnot, yeah, everything is intact. So, like Red Faction here, for example, it plays exactly the same as it did when I first played it on PS2. And also, the PS4 versions of these games to the PlayStation Network, they do actually upscale the games. It actually makes things look a lot better. And so, that was the PlayStation 4. Sony made a huge comeback with the PS4 compared to the mistakes that they made with the PS3. And it definitely benefited them in the long run, considering how immensely popular the PS5 is already. And even as of recording this video in 2023, there's still a lot of people using PS4. It sold really, really well, considering, well, it's the second best-selling PlayStation ever. But should you pick up a PlayStation 4 in 2023? I'd say that depends. Considering the PS5 is still a little on the expensive side, if you're on a budget, it does kind of make sense to get a PS4 because, well, there are plenty of games for it, considering it came out in 2013, and games are actually getting really cheap for this thing. And if you can find one for an affordable price, the PS4 Pro model is definitely a really nice stopgap for when you're ready to get a PS5, because that one supports 4K, and, well, the PS4 Slim and even the original model don't. If you already have plans to upgrade to the PS5, I would just go down that route because PS5 is backwards compatible with nearly every single PS4 game. But if you're looking for a secondary console to just play games on it occasionally, and even as like a streaming box, PS4 is actually a really good option for that. So overall, it really depends on your lifestyle and your interests when it comes to gaming. So, since I've upgraded to a PS5, unfortunately this is the last time you'll ever see my PS4. It has served me very, very well, but it's ought to find a new home. That wraps up another review. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.